Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Papilledema, in the true sense, it's a misnomer. It just says that it's dyschedema in another language. So, in all the textbooks, papilledema means there is associated increased intracranial tension. So, for an ophthalmologist, they wouldn't come with the diagnosis that, okay, my pressure in the brain is high. So, the onus is on the ophthalmologist to find out whether the intracranial pressure is raised or not. I do not have any financial disclosure even on the increased intracranial pressure. So, what are the questions? First thing is first, like you heard about all the talks now, right now, whether it is a true or pseudo dyschedema. Second thing is whether it's unilateral or is it bilateral. Unilateral, you went through all the causes. Even bilateral can be with increased tension or it cannot be with increased tension. And bilateral can be because of local inflammation. Bilateral can be because of retinal causes like VKH or things like that. Bilateral can be with increased tension. That can be due to tumor or it can be due to benign increase in the tension, what you call as IIH. One addition and the most important thing is the hypertensive increase in the tension. So just doing a sphygmomanometry will clinch the diagnosis. Even in hypertensive retinopathy, the disc edema is mainly due to the increased intracranial tension. So these are the things we can see in this, and our role is to monitor the disc edema and in sometimes prognosticate. Even if there is a tumor or if there is IH, our role is a lot in this management of this disease. And all of you know that the flow of this CSF from lateral ventricles to the third ventricle and fourth ventricle, and it comes down, and wherever there is a blockage they can have increased intracranial tension, and wherever it is, depending upon the structure here, if it is here it can cause ataxia, if it is here it can cause chiasmal compression, and so on and so forth. It just uh, relates to where is the tumor. So this is basically what happens. Increased CSF around the brain. This leads to pressure around the optic nerve, pressure on the optic nerve, and obstruction of this orthograde axoplasmic flow leads to visible optic disc swelling. This can be variable disc swelling. Early stage, if you detect, you can just see RNFL edema in both eyes. If it is significant and advanced tumor, you will see atrophic edema. So there are different stages, and most of this papilledema in the early stages, it will not cause any decrease in visual acuity. They will have transient obscuration of vision. And these are the three theories where it can cause the theories that has been proposed. Gower says that it's mainly due to the inflammation, and Jackson's theory, it says it's mainly vasomotor instability because there is an obstruction in the orthoplasmic blood flow. And Harris, it's kind of vascular as well as inflammation. It's a kind of combination of theory. And basically what happens is, this is very simple. Most often they can have a collateral damage on the sixth nerve. That's why it's a pseudolocalizing sign. And most of these patients, if you clearly ask, they will have diplopia, especially because of sixth nerve paralysis. And these are the causes for the increased tension. It can be tumor, it can be hemorrhage, it can be inflammation, it can be just meningitis. So this is just drainage and production and demand and supply, or drainage kind of. And I think the presentation is summed up here. As I said, first stage, because even in unilateral, sometimes you get the doubt whether I should get an MRI or not. So if you put the template, whether it is pseudo or true, whether it is local lesions like optic neuritis or AON, whether it is bilateral, first thing I would do in any kind of bilateral disc edema is check the blood pressure. Irrespective of their age, you will not be surprised that many cases you can check. And then your most important, this tells you that whether there is mass there or whether there is any kind of idiopathic increase in the tension. So most of these patients, as you know, they will come with blurred vision, transient visual obscuration. Whenever the tension goes up in the brain, especially in IIH, pressure may not be 220 or 250 all the time. Depending upon your posture, if you are sitting or lying down, you can have a dizziness and a transient visual obscuration. And photopsia and diplopia are also common in this group. And always they will have this pulsatile tinnitus and headache. This is additional thing. And the beauty of this thing is most of these things can be elicited in the clinic, whether it is retrospect history or while you are seeing a patient, you can ask for all of these histories because it's mostly a clinical diagnosis till the stage where you have to decide whether it's a tumor or not. And signs basically initially will have blurring of optic disc and all the cup fills up, and then there is edema of NFL, and there could be choroidal folds in advanced stage. These are mechanical signs. I think this is especially useful for residents to enumerate 5 mechanical signs of disc edema or papilledema, and there are 5 vascular signs of disc edema or papilledema. So this is mainly vascular, whether there is congestion, there can be arteriolar attenuation, especially in malignant hypertension. There can be cotton wool spots, there can be hyperemia of the optic nerve head, and there can be exudate, mainly it's hard exudate or soft exudate. This is already Nikhil has shown how to differentiate between the true and pseudo. I just want to share one of the case here. She came with the mild obscuration of vision. You can see that she has absent wrinkles on one side. That means 7th nerve is involved. So you can see there is deviated angle of the mouth, and this is a typical 7th nerve palsy. And this along, that's why whenever you examine a disc edema, whether you are doing a neurological examination, a 30-second or 40-second cranial nerve examination can be done in any clinic, anywhere in the world, any corner of the clinic you can do it. This is the basic neurology, what we have learned during our MBBS. So you can check this corneal sensation. Even that is affected here. 5th and 7th with disc edema, where is the lesion? It's 90%, it's unless proved otherwise, it's a CP angle tumor, whenever you have these things. And it just needs that thought that, okay, I need to check the corneal sensation and I need to check all the other cranial nerves along with the 3rd, 4th, 6th. And sometimes you can go a little bit extra step to check for ataxia in all these patients in the ophthalmic clinic. So whenever there is abduction lag, this patient had basically an abduction lag of -1, and he has, look at his abduction here and look at his abduction here, and he has disc edema. And this is one of the patients where you can even demonstrate. Best way to demonstrate a spontaneous venous pulsation is by direct ophthalmoscope, but you can also do it with your 78D or a 98D like this, where even if you can't see it, you can even induce. Just press the globe with the finger, one of the finger, and you can demonstrate this spontaneous venous pulsation. What's the importance and what's the significance? I request all the residents to read this significant article from Dr. Miller. It says that it's a very important clinical sign, but it has to be interpreted in the light of history and other clinical findings. It cannot be the only thing. If you see a patient with absent SVP, it does not mean that patient has a tumor. Almost 80 to 90% of the patients will have SVP or induced SVP. Induced SVP is just press the globe. You can see the pulsation while you are doing a 90-day examination. If it is absent, it can be still absent in 10 to 20% of the patients. So this is one of the important message for this. With papilledema, as I told you earlier, if you have these two stages, if the patient comes to you with bilateral disc edema like this, early and established state, their visual acuity will be normal. If you do a Snellen's or whatever visual acuity, that could be almost normal. They will only have other associated optic nerve or a visual function like contrast can be affected, they can have haziness, they can have photopsia, all these things are possible. But we do see many of the patients with the second category, that's the chronic papilledema or the atrophic papilledema. When they come, their vision is almost significantly affected. So this is one of the patients who had retinitis pigmentosa. So if you look at this, it looks like a disc edema, but you can look at this humpy, bumpy kind of appearance, and if you do a autofluorescence, see how well it is seen. If you have a fundus photograph unit, it's very easy to do this, but I don't think so it's required in all the cases, but this is one of the tests where I can do it. All the exposed type of drusen autofluoresce like this. If it is buried, you can't see that. You need a B scan or things like that. So this is again a bilateral drusen. You can see that very well this material here. If you see this, I think it's a easy diagnosis or a spot diagnosis. And again, one more case with this. And sometimes you need the B scan to prove this. You can see this, the calcified material. You need to also have this A scan graph where it will be 100% peak to show this. And sometimes in very rare cases, in buried drusen, you have to even do a CT scan to prove this calcification. So what are the investigations you are going to do thinking that it's a papilledema? This really does not happen in the clinic. You won't work up a patient like papilledema. It just goes hand in hand. You see unilateral disc edema, your direction goes in a different way. You see a bilateral disc edema, your direction of test goes in a different way. I am just putting up some of the tests which are important in general in optic disc edema, and this is very specific to the tumor. If you want to rule out the tumor, these are specific. But again, a bilateral disc edema, first thing, if it is coming for the first time, first test what I will do is a blood pressure checkup. And then you have a dilemma depending upon the socio-economic status of the patient, whether to do a CT scan, whether to do a MRI, whether to do a MRV. What generally I prefer, or maybe the other panels can share that, do an MRI. If there is no tumor, I would add them to do a MRV at the same thing, because you can write this specific note to the radiologist. They can get it if you don't, because I can't write a blanket MRA or MRI, MRV all together. It will cost around 14 to 16,000 rupees for the patient. So you need to be a little bit careful when you order this examination. 30-2 or visual field is very useful, and even if you have Goldman, it's much better, I would say. OCT and all, Dr. Karna had showed some of the importance of this. I will not go into the details. These are all important to monitor, but I wouldn't say that it's important for the diagnosis purpose. And this is one of the patients who had a mild disc edema with hypertensive retinopathy kind of picture, where there is an incomplete macular star on both sides. And MRI scan, the way you can go is either do a CT scan or MRI and then go for MRV, because in the clinic it's little bit difficult to diagnose whether the patient has IIH or patient has tumor leading to papilledema. Sometimes we can say 25-year-old girl coming with significant obesity, recent weight gain, my approach would be more towards doing an MRV. But already they have a poor quality or a good quality CT scan, they come to you. It does not show tumor, then we can directly go for MRV. So these are the small little things we can think of when you are in front of the patients. So this is nothing, just showing a CP angle tumor there. So again, we are not going into the details of this different types of imaging. MRV, as I said, these are the things. Especially when you don't find a tumor, if there is a small or slit-shaped ventricles, I think MRV is a must, because significant amount of patients of venous thrombosis you will miss if you don't do this MRV. So they are important. And most common mistake the neurologists do, this onus is again on the ophthalmologist. When you send for CSF examination or a lumbar puncture, they will just do a CSF analysis and send. Even in 2015, I do get some of the patients when you write, you just get the CSF analysis. From a patient's treatment point of view, I think CSF opening pressure is the most important. I wouldn't say that this is not important. If this is the most important test, and then you can add the CSF analysis, because anyway you take out the fluid, it's important to find out anything else is wrong. So subtle meningitis, all these things can be possible, so you can get both. But specifically write in bold letters to get the CSF opening pressure, or talk to the neurologist or the neurology resident who is doing this. Treatment-wise, from ophthalmologist point of view, I think most of this benign intracranial hypertension can be treated by us, along with consultation of neurologist. You can give these medications, especially this is controversial, but we can do some of this. I think Jyoti has some experience with optic nerve sheath decompression. We will not go into the details of how to treat these patients. I will just show one of the patients. She is a 16-year-old girl who came with diplopia. Obviously, we thought it's a sixth-nerve palsy, probably a tumor. When we examined, this is what she has, obvious sixth-nerve palsy. You can see that this is bilateral, abduction limitation on both sides. Her rest of the movements were fine. She had significant disc edema on both sides. If it is pure sixth-nerve palsy, your diagnosis is different. When you have this, again, even if she is 16 years, first test I will do is blood pressure checkup again in this patient. Generally, hypertensive malignant hypertension patients will not have sixth-nerve palsy. This is general observation, but I can't say 100% it's true. Even if they have sixth-nerve palsy, it's either IH or a tumor, most often. But still, I would go ahead with, and then with the consultation with the neurologist, you will do an MRI as well as an MRV. Both were normal in this patient. What are the options? People even, these are the risk factors for IH. Among this one, and tamoxifen, tetracycline, vitamin A, and minocycline, especially for acne, people take, and these are the drug history you need to take, and any history of recent weight gain in any of these patients. These are the two important things, and any kind of sinus venous thrombosis history we need to take. Not history, the symptoms specifically related to that. And these are the times, like pubertal IH is possible mainly because of this hormonal change, what happens at that age. And some of the other things, like even extreme anemic patients are at high risk for developing IH. And these are the subtle difference between the pediatric as well as adult IH. And first drug of choice is acetazolamide. Most of the patient would require a very high dose of this acetazolamide, and ophthalmologists are the best person to monitor this, because in any case, whatever you do, disappearance of disc edema is the ultimate decision-making sign in the treatment of IH. Even if you have fields, ultimately the disc should be flat before you stop this medication. So steroids are indicated especially if they have significant visual loss. Otherwise, steroids, neurologists usually give steroids for this. It's not a good idea to give steroids for a pure BICH or a idiopathic intracranial hypertension. And then there are surgical management, like medical management, like repeated LP and surgery. These are controversial, whether to do a LP shunt or optic nerve sheath fenestration. In a nutshell, maybe if there is significant visual loss, ONST is a better choice. If there is no significant visual loss, the patient is not responding to the acetazolamide or medical treatment, maybe LP shunt is a better option for this kind of patients. So this is just a cartoon of showing the optic nerve fenestration. In spite of this, there can be recurrence of 6 to 22%, and this is one of the patients we treated. you can see that how soon, this is immediately after 4 to 6 weeks, her diplopia is gone. You can see that esopropia is gone, abduction is improved, and this was her disc edema earlier, and this is later. You can see that everything is resolved. This is the stage we need to pick them up, because if they develop any kind of optic atrophy or visual field defect, it's very, very extremely difficult to treat them. So in summary, I would say papilledema is a sign of systemic disease. I would write these things. In spite of that, even if you are tempted to do a scan, always rule out, look at the periphery of the fundus, see for subtle signs of VKH, make 100% sure that you are not missing any other things in the retina, do a blood checkup, the blood pressure checkup, and then imaging, and afterwards it's a transdisciplinary approach, and most often it's vision as well as life saving in most of the cases. Thank you so much.